My name is Thomas Bennett. I'm 68 years old. For 39 of those years, every Friday night belonged to one place. Harper's Grill. Same brick building. Same corner booth. Same waitress for almost 20 years. My wife, Susan, used to joke that if we ever disappeared, the staff would probably file the missing persons report before our own children. She wasn't wrong. Every anniversary, every birthday, every graduation, every promotion, every bad day ended in booth 12. When Susan died from ovarian cancer 4 years ago, I stopped going for a while. Not because I disliked the restaurant, because walking into that booth without hearing her say, "You always steal my fries," felt impossible. About a year later, I started going again. Always on Fridays. Always booth 12. The waitress, Maria, never asked. She simply placed 2 menus on the table the first few weeks. Then one day, she quietly stopped bringing the second menu. She understood before I did. My daughter, Claire, knew what that booth meant. She'd grown up coloring on the paper placemats there. She celebrated every birthday there until she moved out. When she married Eric 9 years ago, we even held the rehearsal dinner there. Susan cried through half the evening. Happy tears. The kind every parent hopes to cry someday. Life after Susan's death became smaller. Not miserable. Just quieter. I learned how much noise another person adds to a house. 1 coffee mug instead of 2. 1 towel hanging in the bathroom. 1 toothbrush. 1 plate in the dishwasher. Every Friday, though, I still ironed a clean blue shirt. I still drove 12 minutes to Harper's. I still parked beneath the same maple tree. Routine became its own kind of company. 3 weeks before Mother's Day, Claire called. "Dad? Hey, kiddo. We're doing something special this year." "Oh?" "We're taking everyone to Harper's." I smiled without realizing it. "Really?" "Mom always loved it there." For a second, neither of us spoke. It still surprised both of us how often Susan entered conversations without warning. Claire cleared her throat. "We reserved booth 12. I laughed. "Good. You'll come, right?" "I wouldn't miss it. I'll text you the time." When we hung up, I found myself standing in Susan's old sewing room. The room still smelled faintly of lavender. I opened the cedar chest where she kept holiday decorations. Near the bottom sat the little silver napkin ring Harper's had accidentally let us keep almost 20 years earlier. Susan always joked she'd return it someday. She never did. I slipped it into my jacket pocket. Just for luck. The week passed quietly. I mowed the lawn, changed the furnace filter, bought flowers for Susan's grave, fed the birds every morning. Mrs. Donnelly from next door waved while walking her golden retriever. "Big plans Sunday?" "My daughter's taking us all to Harper's." She smiled. Susan would have loved that. I think so too. Saturday afternoon I polished my shoes. Not because anyone would notice. Susan would have. Old habits survive strange things. Sunday arrived warm and clear. I stopped by the cemetery first. Fresh lilies, yellow, her favorite. I wiped a little pollen from the headstone. "I'll tell everyone you would have beaten us at trivia again." The breeze moved through the oak trees. For some reason, that made me smile. Harper's parking lot was already crowded. Families, children, flowers, Mother's Day always filled the place. Inside, Maria spotted me immediately. Her smile appeared, then disappeared almost as fast. She looked uncomfortable. That should have warned me. "Hi, Thomas." Hey, Maria. She glanced toward the reservation stand. You should probably talk to Kelly. Kelly was the hostess. New, young enough to be my granddaughter. She checked the reservation screen. Bennett? Yes. She found it immediately. Then her expression changed. Oh. What? She bit her lip. They asked me to tell you, she looked embarrassed, that the reservation is full. I frowned. I don't understand. I pointed across the dining room. Claire, Eric, my two grandkids, Eric's parents. Everyone was already sitting together at booth 12. My booth. Susan's booth. Kelly lowered her voice. They said, she looked miserable. They weren't expecting another guest. For a second, I honestly believed this had to be some misunderstanding. Then Lily saw me. She jumped halfway out of her seat. Grandpa! Claire reached over, not roughly, not angrily. Just quietly pulled her back into the booth. Lily looked confused. She looked at her mother, then back at me, then slowly sat down. Nobody else stood. Nobody waved. Nobody looked surprised to see me, which meant they all knew. I could feel Maria watching from behind the counter. She'd probably served our family 100 times over the years. She knew exactly what booth 12 meant. Kelly whispered, I'm really sorry. I nodded. It's not your fault. My hand slipped into my jacket pocket. The silver napkin ring rested there beneath my fingers. Cold, smooth, familiar. I stood there another few seconds, long enough for Claire to finally look up. Our eyes met across the restaurant. She opened her mouth. Then Eric leaned toward her and said something I couldn't hear. She looked back down. I turned around, walked out, didn't slam the door, didn't raise my voice, didn't make a scene. Outside, families laughed as they waited for tables. Someone carried balloons. A little boy chased his brother across the sidewalk. Life continued exactly as it should. Except mine suddenly felt much quieter than it had an hour earlier. I reached my truck, sat behind the steering wheel. The engine stayed off. The silver napkin ring still rested in my hand. I stared at it for a very long time. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from my granddaughter Lily. Only 4 words. Grandpa, where did you go? I didn't answer Lily's message right away. Not because I wanted to punish anyone. I simply didn't know how to explain something an 8-year-old shouldn't have to understand. I started the truck, backed out of the parking space, then pulled into the small park across the street instead of driving home. Susan and I used to stop there after dinner sometimes. She liked watching ducks. I liked watching her pretend not to feed them after the signs clearly said not to. The silver napkin ring was still lying on the passenger seat. I picked it up, turned it over between my fingers. On the inside was a tiny scratch. Susan had dropped it once while washing dishes. She laughed for 10 straight minutes because she'd spent 20 years protecting restaurant property. Funny what survives. A scratch, a memory, a marriage. Sometimes longer than people. My phone buzzed again. Lily. Grandpa? Another minute passed. Then another message. Did you get lost? I smiled despite everything. Kids always look for the simplest explanation. Adults invent complicated ones. I finally typed, No, sweetheart. I had to leave early. I'll see you soon. Love you. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, okay. I love you too. The drive home felt longer than 12 minutes. At every red light, I caught myself reaching toward the passenger seat. Susan always kept peppermint candies in the center console. They'd been gone for years. My hand still looked for them. Back home, I hung my blue shirt in the closet. It barely smelled like cologne anymore. Mostly sunshine. I placed the silver napkin ring back into the cedar chest, closed the lid, made myself scrambled eggs for dinner at 6:30 on Mother's Day. Not exactly the meal I'd imagined. Halfway through, I realized I'd forgotten the toast. I didn't bother making it. Monday morning arrived like every other Monday. Coffee, bird feeder, local news. Mrs. Donnelly waved from next door. "How was dinner?" I smiled. "It was different." She laughed. "I swear every Mother's Day restaurant is chaos." You could say that. Neither of us knew how true that sentence really was. Around 10, my phone rang. Claire. I watched it ring until voicemail picked up. A minute later, another call. Then another. Then a text. "Dad, please call me." I set the phone face down. Instead, I walked into the garage. There was an old rocking chair Susan had wanted refinished years ago. I sanded one arm, then the other. The rhythm helped. Wood doesn't ask difficult questions. By Wednesday, the chair finally looked like itself again. Fresh oak, smooth edges, warm color. I carried it onto the front porch. Mrs. Donnelly wandered over carrying banana bread. "I haven't seen you at Harper's." "I've been busy." She looked at the rocking chair. Susan would approve. "I hope so." She handed me the loaf. "I made too much." "You always do. That's how neighbors stay friends." She smiled and headed home. Small kindnesses rarely announce themselves. They just show up carrying warm bread. Thursday afternoon, Maria called. I'd forgotten she'd still had my number from years ago. "Thomas?" "Hi, Maria. I hope I'm not bothering you." "Not at all." She hesitated. "I've been thinking about Sunday." "So have I." She sighed. "I wanted you to know I argued with your daughter." That surprised me. "You did?" "I told her booth 12 belonged to your family." I looked toward the porch. The rocking chair moved gently in the breeze. "She said it still did." Maria's voice became quieter. "But..." She said her father-in-law had never celebrated Father's Day or Mother's Day with their family before. I waited. "And?" "He gets anxious in crowded places." I nodded slowly. "So they wanted him against the wall." Booth 12. The biggest booth. The quietest booth. The one Susan and I had built nearly 40 years of memories inside. Maria continued. I asked if they could simply add another chair. I frowned. What did Claire say? Silence. Finally, she said there wasn't enough room. I almost laughed. Harper's had squeezed 10 people into that booth before. We'd done it ourselves after Ethan was born. There had been plenty of room, just not enough willingness. I shouldn't have called. Maria sounded embarrassed. No, I said quietly. I'm glad you did. That evening I opened the old family photo box. Not because I wanted to feel worse, because I wanted to remember correctly. Memory changes when it's hurting. Pictures don't. There was Claire at 5, holding a milkshake bigger than her head. Claire at 12, laughing because Susan had ketchup on her nose. Claire in her graduation gown. Booth 12 again. Always booth 12. Not because of the restaurant, because that's where our family happened. Friday came. For 39 years, Friday meant Harper's. At 5:50, I found myself reaching for my car keys. Habit. Nothing more. I put them back. Made grilled cheese instead. It tasted fine. That almost made it worse. Saturday morning, Lily knocked on my front door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, she stood there holding a small paper bag. Behind her, Eric waited in the driveway. He stayed beside the SUV. Didn't come up. Lily smiled. I made cookies. She handed me the bag. Half the frosting had already melted. They're beautiful. They're hearts. I noticed. She looked around my porch. Mom said I could only stay 5 minutes. I nodded. 5 minutes sounds pretty special. She giggled. Children don't measure time the way adults do. She climbed into Susan's rocking chair. It's comfy. It took me 3 days to fix. You fixed Grandma's chair? I finally did. She looked toward the garden. I miss her. So do I. Neither of us said anything for a while. Birds landed near the feeder. A squirrel chased another squirrel across the fence. Life kept moving. Then she asked the question. Grandpa. Yeah? Did Mommy make you sad? Children never ask the easy questions. I chose my words carefully. I think your Mommy made a mistake. Like when I spilled orange juice on Grandma's quilt. A little bigger than that. Will she say sorry? I looked toward Eric. He was pretending to check something on his phone. Not once had he looked at the porch. I don't know. Lily nodded seriously. When I heard Ethan, Mommy says sorry fixes the first part. And the second part? Doing better. Susan would have loved that answer. Lily reached into her backpack. I almost forgot. She pulled out a folded paper placemat, Harper's logo across the top, crayons everywhere. In the middle, she'd drawn Booth 12. Stick figures surrounded the table. Me, Grandma with angel wings, Mom, Dad, her, Ethan, even Maria, everyone smiling, except one chair. She had drawn it empty. I saved your seat. My throat tightened. She pointed proudly. So nobody else would take it. I couldn't speak, not for several seconds. Finally, I managed. It's beautiful. She grinned. I knew you'd like it. Eric honked the horn gently. 5 minutes. Exactly. Lily hugged me. I love you. I love you too. She skipped back toward the SUV. Halfway there, she turned. Grandpa? Yeah? Next Friday. She smiled. Can we eat burgers together? I watched her climb into the car, then looked down at the drawing still resting in my hands. An empty chair. Waiting. For the first time since Mother's Day, I realized someone in that family still believed my place had never disappeared. It had simply been left open. The drawing stayed on my kitchen table all week. Every morning, I flattened the corners where the paper kept curling upward. Every evening, I told myself to put it somewhere safe. I never did. Some things deserve to stay where you can see them, especially reminders that not every heart in a family forgets you at the same time. Friday arrived. For 40 years, Fridays had belonged to Harper's. The habit still lived inside me. At 5:15, I shaved. At 5:30, I reached for my blue shirt. At 5:40, I caught myself grabbing my car keys. I laughed quietly. Old routines don't disappear. They simply keep showing up until you teach them otherwise. Instead of driving across town, I carried a lawn chair into the backyard. The evening air smelled like fresh-cut grass. The maple tree Susan had planted 23 years earlier was finally big enough to shade half the yard. She would have been proud of that. She always rooted for things that took a long time to grow. Around 6, my phone buzzed. Claire. I watched it ring, then answered. Hi. Her relief was obvious. Dad. Thank you. For what? For answering. Silence settled between us. Finally, she spoke again. I know I owe you an apology. I looked toward the bird feeder. A cardinal landed on the fence. I think you owe yourself an honest explanation first. She didn't answer immediately. I've been trying to figure one out. Have you? No. Another silence. I keep telling myself I was trying to make everyone happy. Were you? No. What were you trying to do? Her voice dropped. I didn't want anyone to be uncomfortable. There it was. The truth. Not cruelty. Cowardice. Sometimes they look almost identical from the other side. She sighed. Gary's father has never really felt included. I understand. I know what you thought. I thought you'd understand, because you're always understanding. The sentence stayed with me. She hadn't expected me not to understand. She'd expected me to absorb the hurt, like always. Dad. Yes? I never thought you'd leave. I didn't. You know what I mean. I do. She started crying softly, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough for me to hear the breathing change. I'm sorry. I closed my eyes. I believe you. Another pause. But believing you doesn't repair what happened. She whispered, I know. When the call ended, I didn't feel better. But I did feel something different. The truth had finally entered the conversation. And truth, even painful truth, gives people somewhere to stand. The next Tuesday, I received an envelope from Harper's. Inside was a handwritten note from Maria. Thomas, Booth 12 has been reserved every Friday for 40 years under different names. Sometimes Susan's, sometimes yours. Sometimes the Bennett family. I thought you should know something. No one has asked for that booth since Mother's Day. It has sat empty every Friday. I don't think that's a coincidence. Maria, I read the note 3 times, then placed it beside Lily's drawing. The empty chair, the empty booth. 2 different reminders of the same thing. Later that afternoon, Mrs. Donnelly walked over carrying a basket of tomatoes. My garden is out of control. That happens every summer. She set the basket on my porch, then looked at the drawing on the kitchen table through the screen door. That's lovely. My granddaughter made it, she smiled. Children notice more than adults realize. They do. She hesitated. My son didn't speak to me for nearly 3 years. I looked at her. She'd never mentioned that before. What happened? We both kept waiting for the other one to make the first move. And who did? She laughed. My granddaughter. We stood there smiling. Sometimes wisdom comes wrapped inside stories no one planned to tell. Saturday morning, I drove to the cemetery. The grass had been freshly cut. Someone had placed small American flags near the veterans section. I carried fresh daisies this time. Susan liked flowers that looked uncomplicated. I sat on the little folding chair I'd started keeping in my truck. Claire called. The breeze moved through the trees. I think she's finally telling herself the truth. A squirrel darted across the path. Life kept interrupting grief. Maybe that was healthy. I wish you were here. The words came out before I realized I'd spoken them aloud. An older woman walking nearby smiled kindly. She didn't pretend she hadn't heard. She simply nodded. People who spend time in cemeteries understand certain conversations don't need witnesses. On the way home, I stopped at a hardware store. The mailbox needed repainting. The porch light had burned out. One cabinet hinge squeaked. Ordinary Saturday chores. There was comfort in fixing things that actually wanted to be repaired. Sunday afternoon, someone knocked. This time it wasn't Lily. It was Eric. Alone. He stood awkwardly on the porch, holding 2 cups of coffee. I wasn't sure how you take it anymore. I still don't put sugar in it. He handed me one. I remembered. We sat in silence. 5 minutes. Maybe more. Finally he spoke. I owe you an apology, too. I nodded once. You do. I should have said something that day. You should have. I didn't. No. He rubbed the cardboard cup with his thumb. My dad. He searched for the words. Spent most of my childhood working out of state. I waited. When he finally retired, I promised myself I'd never make him feel unwanted. That's a good promise. I kept it. He looked down, and I broke another one. I already knew which one. I forgot you were somebody's father, too. The sentence landed quietly. No excuses, no blaming Claire, no blaming his parents. Just ownership. That mattered. I can't change Mother's Day. No. But... He looked toward the yard. Would you let me try to do better? I thought for a long moment. I'll let you. Relief crossed his face. But understand something. He nodded. You don't earn trust with one conversation. I know. You earn it by becoming predictable. He smiled sadly. I deserve that. You deserve the chance. Those aren't the same thing. He understood. Before leaving, Eric noticed Lily's drawing. He picked it up carefully. I've never seen this. She drew it after Mother's Day. His eyes stopped on the empty chair. He stared much longer than I expected. I didn't know she remembered. Children remember everything, especially the things adults hope they'll forget. Wednesday evening, Claire texted. Could we all meet somewhere? Just us. No holidays, no celebrations, no pressure. I read the message twice, then set the phone down. An hour later, another text arrived. Not Harper's, somewhere new. I smiled. That was the first decision she'd made entirely for me. Not because Harper's belonged to Susan, because she finally understood it still belonged to my grief. I replied, Saturday, noon. She answered almost immediately. Thank you. Friday evening arrived, for the first time in 40 years. I didn't think about driving to Harper's. Instead, I carried Susan's rocking chair to the edge of the porch. The sunset painted the sky orange. The mailbox looked good with fresh paint. The porch light worked again. Inside the house, Lily's drawing rested beside Maria's letter. The empty chair, the empty booth. Neither felt quite as empty anymore. Then, just as darkness settled over the yard, my phone vibrated. It was Maria. Thomas? She sounded almost excited. I thought you should know something before tomorrow. What is it? She laughed softly. You aren't the only one who stopped coming. I frowned. What do you mean? Booth 12 has a reservation tomorrow afternoon. I know. No, she said quietly. You didn't make this one. I barely slept that night. Not because I was nervous, because curiosity has a way of keeping older people awake longer than coffee ever could. Who had reserved booth 12? And why had Maria sounded so certain it mattered? Saturday morning arrived warm and bright. I watered the flowers on the porch, filled the bird feeder. folded the newspaper without reading half of it. The clock over the stove seemed louder than usual. At 11, I put on my blue shirt, the same one I'd worn on Mother's Day. Then I almost took it off. Not because it reminded me of that afternoon. Because I realized I no longer needed clothes to carry memories for me. I changed into a simple gray polo instead. Small decisions sometimes say more than speeches. Claire had chosen a little diner on the other side of town. Nothing fancy. Just pancakes, burgers, coffee, and pie. The kind of place where the waitress still called everyone honey. When I walked in, Claire was already there. Alone. No Eric. No kids. She stood the moment she saw me. For a second, neither of us moved. Then she quietly asked, "Can I hug you?" That mattered, she asked. I nodded once. She wrapped her arms around me, not tightly, carefully, as if she knew broken trust bruised easily. "I'm glad you came." "So am I." We sat down. The waitress poured coffee. Claire stirred hers without drinking it. Something Susan used to do whenever she was nervous. Funny how children inherit habits they never notice. I've replayed Mother's Day every night. I imagine you have. I kept trying to convince myself it wasn't as bad as it looked. She looked up. It was worse. I said nothing. She continued. "I didn't choose Gary's father over you." "No. I chose avoiding conflict." "Yes. And I made you carry the cost." There it was. No excuses. Just truth. I've been like that for years. She laughed softly through tears. "You know what the worst part is?" "What?" "I learned it from watching Mom and me." I frowned. She smiled sadly. "Remember when Grandma complained about Uncle Steve every Thanksgiving?" I nodded. "Mom always said—" Claire paused. "Just let it go. It's easier if your father adjusts." I remembered. Susan hated confrontation. More than once, I had quietly moved my own feelings aside to keep peace at family gatherings. Back then, I thought I was protecting everyone. Maybe I had also taught Claire something neither of us intended. I thought that's what good families did. They compromise. They do. I thought the strongest person should always give up their seat. I looked at her. No. She blinked. The strongest person shouldn't always be the one asked to disappear. The sentence hung between us. She lowered her eyes. "I never realized I'd been asking you to disappear for years." Lunch lasted almost 2 hours. Not because we solved everything. Because we finally stopped pretending. That was enough for one afternoon. As we walked outside, Claire stopped beside my truck. "I have something to ask." "Okay. Would you drive with me?" "Where?" She smiled nervously. "You'll see." 20 minutes later, she turned into Harper's parking lot. I looked at her. "I thought you said somewhere new." I lied. "You did. I've done enough of that." She laughed weakly. I wanted to fix one thing before I ran out of courage. Inside, Maria spotted us immediately. This time she smiled, a real smile. "Right on time." "What is all this?" She only pointed toward the dining room. "Go look." Booth 12 stood exactly where it always had. But something was different. The restaurant wasn't busy. Only one section had been set. One long table, extra chairs, fresh flowers, the old paper placemats. In the center sat a tiny silver card, reserved for the Bennett family. Since 1984, I stopped walking. My throat tightened. Then I noticed everyone else. Eric, Lily, Ethan, Eric's parents, Mrs. Donnelly, Maria. Even two retired waitresses Susan had known years ago. Nobody clapped. Nobody gave speeches. They simply stood, waiting. Claire reached into her purse. "I've had this for 3 weeks." She placed something in my hand. The silver napkin ring. The one I'd returned to the cedar chest. "I found it after Mother's Day." She smiled through tears. "I finally understood why you kept it." I closed my fingers around it. For the first time in years, it no longer felt like something I was protecting. It felt like something I could finally share. "Grandpa!" Lily ran over. This time nobody stopped her. She hugged my waist. "I saved your chair." "I know." She beamed. "I told everyone." She pointed proudly. Sure enough, next to my place sat one empty chair. Not for me. For Susan. Nobody had said it aloud. Nobody needed to. A small white lily rested on the seat. The whole restaurant understood. Dinner was quiet, comfortably quiet. People passed mashed potatoes. Eric's father asked Ethan about baseball. Mrs. Donnelly argued with Maria about who baked the better apple pie. Lily insisted everyone look at the newest drawing she'd made. Life. Ordinary life. The kind I'd missed more than I realized. Halfway through dessert, Eric stood. "I'd like to say one thing." He looked at me. "Not because anyone told me to." He took a breath. "My father spent years believing time together mattered more than presents." He smiled toward his dad. He was right. Then he looked back at me. I forgot another father needed the same thing. He sat back down. No applause, no dramatic forgiveness. Just silence. The good kind. When dinner ended, families slowly filtered outside. The evening air was cooler now. Claire walked beside me to the parking lot. "I know things won't be normal tomorrow." "No." "Or next week." "No." She nodded. "I'll keep showing up anyway." I believed she meant it. That mattered more than hearing the words, "I'm sorry," 100 more times. Before I climbed into my truck, Maria stopped me. I almost forgot. She handed me the framed paper placemat Lily had drawn. She'd laminated it. At the bottom, she'd written one sentence in careful handwriting. "No one can take Grandpa's seat." I laughed quietly. "So this is restaurant property now?" Maria grinned. "We're making an exception." That evening, I carried the frame into the house. I didn't put it in the cedar chest. Some memories deserve sunlight. I hung it beside the hallway where Susan's favorite photograph had always been. The empty chair in the drawing no longer looked lonely. It looked reserved. Not for grief, for love that had earned its place. The next Friday, just before 5, my phone rang. It was Lily. "Grandpa?" "Yeah, sweetheart? Are we still burger buddies?" I smiled. "I don't think that's changing." "Good," she giggled. "I already told Grandma's chair we'd be back." After we hung up, I grabbed my keys. For the first time in a long while, driving to Harper's didn't feel like driving toward the past. It felt like making room for the future.